everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to take a look back at Hulk from 2003 and where it lies within the hierarchy of superhero movie adaptations, and whether it stands overall as an ambitious misfire or was it much more of an underappreciated movie simply coming out at the wrong time. Now when we look at the film itself, it was released on June 20th, 2003. It had a very high caliber cast starring Eric Bana, Nick Nolte, Jennifer Connelly, Sam Elliott and Josh Lucas, and it was directed by revered filmmaker Ang Lee. It was of course the first live-action cinematic interpretation of the Incredible Hulk, who still stands as one of the most iconic comic book characters ever. Now prior to this movie, the most well-known live-action adaptation was the 1970s television series starring Bill Bixby, of which myself and a whole host of generation of fans still have very fond memories of. Now this version here covered the well-known origin of the Hulk as scientist Bruce Banner being exposed to gamma radiation after saving his friend Rick Jones from a scientific accident. And from this incident, Bruce unwillingly gains the ability to transform into a massive green-skinned hulking brute monster. With immense levels of strength and power, Bruce goes on to live a very tortured existence, forever trying to cure himself from these transformations, which are fueled by anger and stress. Now the 2003 movie offered a different spin by seeing a Bruce Banner tortured by repressed childhood memories. We see very early on in the film that his father David, who in his younger years was sent to a mental institution for 30 years after constant experiments on himself, and he soon realised that he had passed something on to his son. Bruce's transformations soon catch the attention of the military, who typically want to capture the secret of Bruce's powers and use them for their own weaponised ambitions. Now when we look back at the Hulk from 2003, many years after its release, it's still a movie with very mixed results. We asked the original question as to whether it was underappreciated or whether it was a misdirection, and I think overall the answer is a bit of both. On the one hand, it's a very ambitious, bold, much more darker take, very much more built on concept and metaphor rather than action and spectacle. And I can vividly remember the hype going into this release after the mainstream successes of both the X-Men and Spider-Man movies, with many comic book fans thinking this would be another big action mainstream blockbuster, full of that comic book adventure and wall-to-wall spectacle. But this movie was so much more of a different direction, much more of an introspective and somber take. And going back to the idea of concept, where Ang Lee took the idea of a comic book literally, where we see multiple sequences of the screen segmented into comic book panels. We have many scenes merging and blending into one another, almost like a college painting. And it was a very novel approach that, like the movie itself, had mixed results. The idea probably working best with the flashback memories. Now it's far less successful when it comes to the action sequences, where it's not really ideal for the viewer to try and focus on the action where it's being in separate boxes all over the screen. Now where Ang Lee was most successful in this film was tapping into the psychology of Bruce Banner. As the Hulk as a character is so driven by his physicality, it would have been so easy to have 2 hours of this film just smashing objects and loads of explosions. But Lee went for a far more substantial take here, connecting Bruce's transformations to the emotional and tragic secret of his family, which makes so much sense and adds real weight to the character. The whole father-son dynamic was very interesting, and something that we really hadn't seen done before in terms of a Hulk story. This is noted especially when we come to the overall reveal of the family tragic incident by Bruce's father David in a conversation with Betty Ross. And when the reveal happens, it's very bleak and dark and very much shocking when you watch this film for the first time. But on the other side, there's also a beautiful poetic sense about it all. It's all very well put together, and I think it was sequences like this that really added value to this overall film. Now the downside to this approach is that it does make the film very much of a slow burn. Now yes, we don't get mindless spectacle, but I do think that Ang Lee perhaps took too long in his storytelling. The mere fact that we don't even see the Hulk appear for close to the first 40 minutes, I think was a mistake, especially for a first time cinematic adaptation of the character. Now any adaptation for the Hulk, whether it be live action or animation, there has to be a certain pace, a certain energy and a certain intensity because of the nature of the character. But because of the film's more dark and brooding tone, with very little moments of brevity or humour, it does end up being a bit of a drag, and it doesn't have the same rewatchability as future Hulk installments. Now this was very unfortunate because when we do get to this spectacle in terms of the Hulk, involving a climatic 20 minutes where we see his full ability unleashed, involving some fantastic sequences where we see him sprinting furiously amongst the desert before leaping for several miles across the landscape, we have these very wide spanning and aerial shots, and visually all looks very good. We then see Hulk come under attack furiously from the military. We see him running along canyons, flicking missiles as they're shot towards him. We see him jumping onto the helicopters, throwing missiles back. We see him charging into tanks and swinging and throwing them over long distances. And this is when the movie finally achieves the epic visualization of the character that I think audiences were hoping for when going into the film. Now, for all of the film's merits, there are certain problems here. And its biggest one, apart from the slow pacing, is the Hulk's actual creation itself. Now, of course, they decided to go full CGI when creating a character, which was the right decision, as effects were advanced now, and we simply couldn't have had a Lou Ferrigno type of bodybuilder all painted in green as what we got with the television show, as that simply wouldn't have been satisfactory for audiences at the time. And despite major CGI achievements that we've seen in cinema, with big event films such as the T-1000 from Terminator 2, all of the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, and Gollum of course from Lord of the Rings films, having a digital Hulk as a character, fully fledged and interactive, was still a big challenge. And overall, I don't think the movie quite achieves what it was setting out to do. If we look at the construct and the design of the character, I just feel the physique is too bloated. And some of the proportions look really off in terms of his head and his shoulders and his upper body, and it just doesn't give him that dynamic look as what we should have. And whilst again we give some leeway because this was the first time effort achieving something like this, there is definitely room for improvement, and we would go on to see that with future cinematic installments after this film. And even a climatic showdown between Bruce and his father, who becomes the absorbing man from the comics, it ends up being very messy, again with the effects all over the place. We have this very dark, muddy contrast, and it's very hard to make out what's going on. And definitely a more typical climax I think would have been far more suitable this time around. Now, in terms of the high quality cast, I think they all perform very well. Jennifer Connelly is that typically beautiful, compassionate character as always. Sam Elliott was a great choice as General Ross, all fury and discipline. Eric Bana I think was a good pick for Bruce Banner, though I think his character is somewhat subdued and probably a bit too somber and downbeat to be a genuine appealing protagonist. Now, without question, the star turn here is from Nick Nolte as Bruce's father, David. The movie, of course, sees him all rugged and rough, having come out of a mental institution, and he's typically fiery and intense, as what we expect to see from the actor. Yes, it's a bit crazy and maybe a bit over the top, but it definitely is the performance that leaves the most impression. So when we go on to the movie's overall release, and unfortunately it was deemed a major box office disappointment, managing to gross only $245.4 million from $137 million, despite having one of the best openings of the year with $60 million opening weekend. Now, its box office tally overall was definitely not what Universal was expecting, having seen a comic book movie genre being rejuvenated to big success with both the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies and the Fox X-Men films, plus acquiring the director of Oscar-winning hit Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Everything on paper seemed to be leading to a massive blockbuster success, but sadly that wasn't to be. And overall, I just think audiences just found the dark and brooding tone not very appealing, and again, as I mentioned before, the movie was a bit too talky, a bit too dialogue driven, and not really providing those mainstream action and spectacular thrills that they had experienced before. Many people also weren't very impressed with the Hulk's rendition. It has been referred to by so many as a human frog splashing over the screen, which I think may have been a bit harsh, but again was a criticism of how the design was very much displaced. And following the film's underperformance, we really didn't see any more Hulk outings until the soft reboot of the character with The Incredible Hulk in 2008, directed by Louis Leterrier, in which the lead role was overtaken by Edward Norton. This, of course, was the second installment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which had begun with Iron Man in the same year. And this movie really dialed back on the psychological concepts that we'd seen from the Ang Lee version and definitely upped the ante in terms of the spectacle. But admittedly, we did get a superior CGI rendition of the Hulk this time round. And we did see the character develop even further. From the Avengers movies, in terms of the first film, plus Age of Ultron, and even further with Thor Ragnarok and Avengers Endgame, which saw much more comedic elements added, especially with She-Hulk Attorney at Law. But when we look back at Hulk 2003, we do ask the question again whether it was misunderstood or underappreciated. It's a very interesting debate, while showing a lot of ambition, I do think the much more art housey, conceptually driven direction may not have been ideal for the first big outing, as audiences at this stage of movies probably weren't ready at the time for such introspection and much more deeper subject matter. But as we enter 2024, we do look at the superhero genre now, where many of the Marvel movies in particular are being criticised for being far too campy or comedic. If Hulk 2003 was released now, maybe its ambitious approach would have been far more appreciated and people would have welcomed and been far more patient with this much more steady approach in trying to provide much more deeper and psychological themes. I've often felt that Ang Lee's movie as a whole is the first half of a truly great Incredible Hulk film if you combine the much more deeper subject matter of this film with the superior CGI and much more intense action of the 2008 version. Merge those two together, then perhaps we would have had the truly great and Incredible Hulk movie that is very much deserving of the character. So there's my overall thoughts and feelings when looking back at Ang Lee's Hulk movie from 2003. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you have any other further suggestions regarding any other movies, television series, or any other subjects within the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover, then also let me know within the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.